When Jesus spoke of the kingdom of heaven, he was not pointing to a distant realm beyond the clouds, nor to a future state that would arrive at the end of time. Rather, he was revealing one of the most profound spiritual truths ever shared with humanity. The kingdom is within you. This teaching, perhaps the most transformative, yet widely misunderstood of his messages, was shared most intimately with those disciples who had prepared their hearts to receive it. The kingdom of God does not come with observation, nor will they say, "See here," or "See there," for indeed, the kingdom of God is within you. These words reflect the first great secret that Jesus revealed only to those closest to him, that divinity dwells not in temples made of stone, but in the sanctum of the awakened soul. The disciples who received this teaching were initially perplexed. Having been raised in traditions that emphasized external rituals and sacred spaces, the concept that God's true dwelling place was within their own consciousness represented a revolutionary understanding of spirituality. This was not merely a poetic metaphor, but a literal truth about the structure of spiritual reality. What does it mean that the kingdom is within? It means that the divine presence, that infinite wellspring of love, wisdom, and creative power, is not separate from you. It exists as the very foundation of your being. The journey to God is not a journey outward or upward, but inward. It is not about crossing physical distance, but about removing the veils of ignorance and illusion that prevent you from recognizing what has always been present. Edgar once spoke of this inner kingdom as the meeting place between the finite and the infinite. In his readings, he emphasized that this inner sanctum is the sacred space where human consciousness can directly commune with the divine. This teaching mirrors what Jesus shared with his most dedicated followers, that the divine spark resides within each soul, waiting to be fully recognized and expressed. The practical application of this teaching begins with silence. Jesus would often withdraw to quiet places to pray, showing his disciples through example the importance of inner stillness. In silence, the constant chatter of the mind gradually subsides, and awareness naturally turns toward its source. This is not merely relaxation, but a profound shift in consciousness, from identifying with passing thoughts and emotions to resting in the awareness that contains them. Through meditation and contemplative prayer, we can begin to experience what Jesus meant by the kingdom within. These practices are not about achieving special states or having mystical visions, but about becoming increasingly aware of the divine presence that has always been our true nature. As Jesus taught his closest followers, this presence is characterized by perfect peace, unconditional love, and a wisdom that transcends intellectual understanding. The inner kingdom also represents our connection to all of creation. When we discover the divine within, we simultaneously discover our oneness with all beings. This was why Jesus emphasized love as the foundation of his teaching, because when we recognize the divine within ourselves, we naturally recognize it in others as well. The boundaries that seem to separate us begin to dissolve, and we understand that we are all expressions of the same divine consciousness. This first secret fundamentally transforms our approach to spirituality. No longer is it about appeasing an external deity through sacrifice or ritual, but about awakening to the divine presence that is already fully present within. Jesus taught his disciples that this awakening is available to anyone willing to turn their attention inward with sincerity and devotion. The obstacles to experiencing this inner kingdom are not distance or unworthiness, but simply our attachment to illusion. We have become so identified with our thoughts, emotions, and bodily sensations that we mistake them for our true identity. We have forgotten that we are, in essence, spiritual beings having a human experience, not human beings having occasional spiritual experiences. Jesus invited his disciples to die to their false self, the ego identity constructed of memories, beliefs, and societal conditioning, so that their true self could be resurrected into conscious awareness. This spiritual rebirth is what he referred to when he spoke of being born again, or born from above. It is an awakening to our original nature, which has never been separate from the divine. The practical path to realizing this inner kingdom involves regular periods of silence and self-inquiry, the cultivation of present moment awareness, and the practice of seeing the divine in all beings. It requires that we gradually release our attachment to external sources of validation and fulfillment, turning instead to the inexhaustible wellspring within. As we begin to live from this understanding, our lives naturally align with divine principles. Our actions become expressions of love rather than fear, generosity rather than greed, forgiveness rather than resentment. We begin to embody the truth that Jesus shared with his closest disciples, that we are not merely servants of God, but children of God, carrying the divine essence within our very being. The second secret Jesus shared with his closest disciples concerned the extraordinary power contained within sacred words, sounds, and vibrations. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. This profound statement reveals the creative force behind all existence, the divine vibration that brings all things into being. Jesus taught his intimate circle that words are not merely symbols for communication, but vessels of spiritual power that can heal, transform, and connect us directly with the divine. The Aramaic language he spoke was rich with vibrational potency, and when he uttered certain phrases or names of God, he was invoking specific frequencies that could literally reshape reality around him. This secret teaching explains many of the miraculous healings attributed to Jesus. When he spoke words of healing, he wasn't simply expressing a wish. He was channeling divine creative energy through precisely calibrated sounds. The disciples who were prepared to receive this knowledge were shown how to attune their own speech to these sacred vibrations. The universe itself, as Jesus revealed, is fundamentally vibrational in nature. Everything that exists, from the smallest subatomic particle to the vastest galaxy, is in a constant state of vibration. When we understand this, we begin to recognize that sound is not merely a physical phenomenon, but a doorway to influencing the very fabric of creation. The disciples were taught specific sacred sounds, what we might today call mantras, that could align their consciousness with different aspects of divine reality. Some sounds were for healing physical ailments, others for purifying emotional blockages, and still others for expanding spiritual awareness. These were not magical incantations, but precise tools for working with the vibrational nature of existence. Jesus explained that the human voice, when properly attuned, becomes a conduit for divine energy. This is why he often emphasized speaking with authority and conviction. It wasn't about volume or forcefulness, but about aligning one's entire being with the truth of what was being expressed, allowing the words to carry the full power of divine intention. One of the most powerful applications of this teaching was in prayer. Jesus taught his disciples that effective prayer is not about begging an external deity for favors, but about aligning one's consciousness with divine reality through the power of sacred words. When he gave them what we now call the Lord's Prayer, he was providing them with a sequence of sounds that, when spoken with understanding and devotion, could transform their consciousness and connect them directly with the divine presence. The Aramaic words Abun Dabwashmaya, often translated as Our Father who art in heaven, carried vibrational frequencies that help shift the speaker's awareness from mundane concerns to cosmic consciousness. Each phrase of the prayer was designed not just for its conceptual meaning, but for its vibrational effect on the human energy system. This secret teaching extended beyond formal prayer to encompass all speech. Jesus taught his disciples to be mindful of every word they uttered, recognizing that each sound carries creative power. By your words, you will be justified, and by your words, you will be condemned. This wasn't a threat of divine judgment, but a practical observation about the power of speech to shape our reality. Even the simple affirmation, I am, which in Aramaic connected directly to the divine name revealed to Moses, was shown to be a powerful tool for spiritual transformation. By consciously speaking these words while holding awareness of one's divine nature, the disciples could experience a direct connection with the source of all being. The healing applications of this teaching were particularly significant. Jesus showed his closest followers how specific combinations of sounds could restore harmony to different systems of the body. These weren't magical spells, but precise vibrational keys that could unlock the body's innate healing intelligence. When he spoke words of healing, he was essentially recalibrating the vibrational patterns of the person receiving the healing. Sound healing was understood to work on multiple levels simultaneously: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. A single sacred phrase, properly intoned, could address the root cause of suffering across all these dimensions. This explains why Jesus' healings were often so complete and transformative, addressing not just symptoms, but the fundamental imbalances underlying them. The disciples were taught to enter a state of deep receptivity before working with sacred sounds. In this state, similar to what we might now call a meditative state, they could feel the vibrations moving through their bodies and energy fields, clearing blockages and restoring harmony. They learned that the effectiveness of sacred sound was amplified by the purity of consciousness through which it was expressed. This teaching also shed light on the creative process itself. Jesus revealed that all creation begins with sound, with the divine word, or logos. By aligning our speech with divine intention, we participate in the ongoing creation of reality. This is why affirmations and declarations spoken from a place of spiritual awareness can be so powerful. They tap into the same creative principle through which the universe itself came into being. The concept of speaking things into existence was not understood as magical thinking, but as working with the fundamental laws of vibrational reality. The disciples were taught to speak as if what they desired was already manifest, recognizing that this alignment of consciousness was a crucial step in bringing it into physical form. The third, and perhaps most profound secret Jesus shared with his closest disciples concerned the soul's journey after physical death. This teaching was reserved for those who had demonstrated spiritual maturity, for it transcended conventional understandings and revealed the continuity of consciousness beyond the dissolution of the body. "In my Father's house are many mansions," Jesus told them, speaking not of physical structures, but of the many dimensions and states of consciousness that the soul encounters on its eternal journey. This metaphor pointed to a vast spiritual cosmology, a map of the afterlife experience that offered his disciples both comfort and guidance in preparing for their own transition. Jesus revealed that death is not an ending, but a transition, a doorway through which consciousness passes on its return journey to the divine source. The fear of death that grips humanity, he taught, is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of our nature. We are not bodies housing souls, but souls temporarily expressing through physical forms. When the body completes its purpose, the soul continues its evolution uninterrupted. What happens in the moments after physical death? According to Jesus' confidential teachings, the soul experiences a period of adjustment as it releases its identification with the physical form. This process, which he compared to awakening from a dream, varies in duration, depending on how strongly the individual was attached to material existence. Those who lived with spiritual awareness find this transition easier, while those deeply identified with the body may experience confusion or resistance. Jesus taught that we create our initial after-death experience through our beliefs, expectations, and the state of consciousness we cultivated during physical life. This is why he emphasized the importance of dying daily to the ego's illusions and awakening to our spiritual nature while still embodied. Those who have already experienced inner spiritual awakening recognize the afterlife transition as a familiar expansion of consciousness rather than a fearful journey into the unknown. After the initial adjustment period, the soul undergoes what Jesus described as a life review, not as a judgment imposed by an external deity, but as a natural process of self-reflection. In this panoramic experience, we perceive not only our actions, but their effects on others, experiencing them from multiple perspectives simultaneously. This is not punishment, but a profound learning opportunity that promotes spiritual growth and compassion. The disciples were taught that this life review occurs in the presence of loving spiritual beings, what some traditions call angels or guides, who provide support and context for understanding the soul's experiences. Jesus himself promised to be present for his followers during this transition, saying, "I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also." Following the life review, the soul enters a state that corresponds to its level of spiritual development. Jesus described various mansions or dimensional realms where souls continue their evolution. These are not permanent destinations, but stages in an ongoing journey of expansion and return to the divine source. Some souls may also choose to return to physical embodiment to continue their learning and service, what we now understand as reincarnation. This teaching contradicted the simplistic heaven-hell dichotomy prevalent in conventional religious thinking. Jesus revealed a much more nuanced understanding of the afterlife as a continuation of the soul's evolutionary journey. The hell states he sometimes referenced were understood not as eternal punishment, but as temporary experiences of purification, the natural consequences of harmful actions and limiting beliefs that the soul must eventually transcend. The most advanced souls, Jesus taught, move into increasingly refined states of consciousness, where they serve as guides and teachers for others. These enlightened beings form what he called the communion of saints, or the great cloud of witnesses, those who have completed their human journey and now assist in the evolution of consciousness throughout creation. The practical implications of this teaching were profound. By understanding the continuity of consciousness beyond death, the disciples were liberated from existential fear and able to live with greater purpose and presence. Jesus encouraged them to prepare for the afterlife transition, not through religious rituals or beliefs, but through the cultivation of expanded awareness and unconditional love. "Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven," he told them, referring not to material rewards, but to the qualities of consciousness that transcend physical death: wisdom, compassion, and spiritual understanding. These treasures determine the quality of our afterlife experience and our continuing evolution as souls. Jesus taught specific practices to prepare for the transition beyond death. These included regular contemplation of one's mortality, not as a morbid exercise, but as a way to clarify priorities and deepen appreciation for the present moment. He also encouraged the practice of conscious dreaming, recognizing that the dream state offers a preview of the kind of non-physical awareness we will experience after death. Perhaps most importantly, he emphasized the cultivation of present moment awareness. Those who learn to be fully present while in the body develop the attentional stability that allows for conscious navigation of the afterlife states. "Watch and pray," he often told his disciples, an instruction to maintain wakeful awareness in all states of consciousness. For those who had received this teaching and incorporated it into their spiritual practice, death lost its sting. They understood it not as punishment or tragedy, but as graduation, the soul's natural progression to the next phase of its eternal journey. This perspective transformed not only their relationship with death, but their approach to life, infusing each moment with greater meaning and purpose. As with all the secret teachings Jesus shared with his closest disciples, this understanding of the soul's journey was not meant to remain hidden forever. "What I tell you in the dark, speak in the daylight," he instructed them. These profound spiritual truths were to be preserved and transmitted to those ready to receive them, a transmission that continues to this day through those who have kept alive the esoteric dimensions of Jesus' teachings. The journey of the soul beyond death remains one of the most transformative secrets that Jesus shared. It offers not only comfort in the face of mortality, but a profound reframing of our entire existence. We are eternal beings on an eternal journey, temporarily expressing through physical form, but never limited to it. In this understanding lies true freedom, the liberation from fear that allows us to live and die with grace, purpose, and profound peace. If these ancient spiritual teachings have illuminated your path, please subscribe to our channel for more profound wisdom that was shared only with the closest disciples. Leave a comment below, sharing which of these 3 secrets resonated most deeply with your spirit. Your engagement helps us continue bringing these transformative teachings to light. Remember, as Jesus taught, the journey inward is the most important one you'll ever take. Let's walk this path together.